he followed all the rules. For more than a decade, he built a life for his family on the promise of a piece of the American dream, a promise called DACA. He paid his taxes. He went to work. He was raising his children as Americans. But one morning, it was all torn away. In an instant, the life he had so carefully built was shattered by a knock on the door. This is the story of a DACA recipient's sudden arrest, how it crushed his wife and children, and their fight for answers when the system you trust turns against you. He has a valid DACA. He's lived in this country his entire life, and this is the only home he's ever known. He's an honorable, responsible man, and he's never been in trouble because he's always dedicated himself to following the law. In that instant, they destroyed our family. I demand justice. I demand my husband's freedom. And I demand that they stop destroying families. For Paulo Gamez Lira, America was the only home he'd ever really known. He was brought to the United States from Mexico when he was just an infant, so all his memories, his friendships, his entire world was built under the Texas sun. He was, in every way but on paper, an American. When the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, DACA, was introduced, it felt like a prayer answered. It was a chance to finally step out of the shadows. DACA doesn't grant legal status, but it offers temporary protection from deportation and, crucially, a work permit. For young people who grew up in the U.S. without papers, it was a lifeline. Paulo grabbed it. He applied, paid the fees, and passed the background checks, something he would do like clockwork every 2 years to renew his status. With DACA, Paulo built a life. He became a skilled forklift operator, a reliable employee who worked hard to support his growing family. He met and married Alejandra, the love of his life, and they had 4 beautiful children, all U.S. citizens. They were building their own quiet corner of the American dream in Horizon City, a community just outside El Paso. But their life wasn't easy. Their youngest daughter was born with serious medical issues that required constant care. She had only just come home from a long hospital stay. For the first time in months, the family of 6 was finally all together. Alejandra remembers it as a brief moment of peace, a time when they felt like the future was finally their own. Barely 3 weeks had passed since our baby finally left the hospital and we were enjoying our new life as a family, she later said, recalling those precious few weeks before everything changed. This fragile peace, however, was built on shaky ground. The DACA program has been stuck in legal battles for years, caught in the shifting winds of politics. For hundreds of thousands of recipients, this means living with constant stress, a kind of double standard where you feel safe one minute and totally exposed the next. There's a deep, underlying fear that the protection you've earned and paid for could just disappear. For Paulo and Alejandra, that fear was about to become their reality. The morning of August 13th started like any other day. Paulo was in his car in his own driveway, with 2 of his young kids in the back seats. Suddenly, 3 unmarked cars swarmed him, blocking him in. 7 men in plain clothes, some masked and armed, rushed his car. They wouldn't say who they were as they roughly yanked him from the driver's seat, injuring his shoulder even though he wasn't resisting. His children watched, terrified, as their father was taken away. There was no explanation, no warrant, just the swift, confusing violence of an arrest. For Alejandra, the world simply fell apart. The man who was the rock of their family, the father her kids adored, was just gone. Paulo was taken to the Otero County Processing Center in New Mexico, an immigration jail notorious for its harsh conditions. He was now cut off from his wife, his 4 young children, and his infant daughter who desperately needed him, especially during her medical crisis. The cruelty of it was staggering. As one of his advocates said, he has a baby who's a newborn who's sick who badly needs him, other kids under 10 who are counting on him, and a U.S. citizen wife. Inside the detention center, it only got worse. Immigration officials repeatedly pressured Paulo to voluntarily self-deport, to give up the life he'd spent a lifetime building in the only country he knew. This is a common tactic, meant to break a person's spirit. For someone with DACA, it's a twisted irony. They are told their status is meaningless. One officer reportedly told another DACA recipient in detention that DACA was cancelled, that you would stand no chance in staying in the country. This completely ignores the whole point of the program. Paulo had a valid, current DACA status. He had passed every single background check, year after year. While DACA isn't full legal status, it's a formal promise from the government to defer deportation. His detention wasn't just cruel, his lawyers argued it was illegal. The emotional damage to his family was immediate and devastating. Suddenly losing a parent can leave deep psychological scars on kids, leading to anxiety, depression, and trauma. They can struggle in school and suffer from behavioral problems. For the Gamez Lira children, who saw the traumatic arrest happen, the impact was intense. Their sense of safety was shattered. Alejandro was left to pick up the pieces, consumed by fear and helplessness. On top of the financial crisis of losing the family's main provider, the emotional weight is crushing. Families in this situation live in a state of constant anxiety, terrified that another knock on the door means someone else will be taken. This has been the most difficult time of our lives, Alejandro said, but we never lost hope that justice would prevail. The legal battle started immediately. The ACLU of New Mexico and a private law firm filed a habeas corpus petition, which is a legal demand for the government to justify why it's holding someone. They argued that detaining Paulo, a DACA recipient with no criminal record that would disqualify him, was a clear violation of the law. The case revealed just how flimsy the reason for his arrest was. A decade ago, when he was a teenager, Paulo had a minor run-in with the law for marijuana possession. The charge was dropped to disorderly conduct. That was it. A minor incident from 10 years ago that had never stopped him from renewing his DACA status. To use that as the reason for his sudden, violent arrest was, as his lawyers put it, unconscionable. Detaining Paulo Cesar Gamez Lira was not only unnecessary, it was unlawful, and it inflicted needless harm on him and his family, said Alex Flores, a senior counsel on his legal team. And Paulo's case isn't unique. DACA recipients across the country have been detained during traffic stops, at work, and even at airports. Sometimes the reasons are vague, other times, minor offenses are used to justify an arrest. This is the fragile reality of DACA. It offers protection, but that protection can be revoked at any time, leaving people in a constant state of uncertainty. That fear is a daily reality for hundreds of thousands of people, leading to anxiety, depression, and even symptoms of PTSD. The trauma ripples out to the entire family. Children of parents who are detained or deported show higher rates of anxiety, sadness, and withdrawal. The fear can become so intense that families start to isolate themselves, avoiding public places or even doctor's appointments for fear of running into immigration authorities. For 42 days, Paulo sat in a detention center, separated from his family. For 42 days, Alejandra cared for her sick baby and her traumatized children while fighting for her husband's return. She became his strongest advocate, her voice joining a chorus of lawyers and activists demanding his release. Finally, on September 24, a federal judge ordered Paulo's immediate release. The government didn't oppose it, a quiet admission that they had no legal grounds to hold him. His lawyers celebrated the win but condemned the system that allowed it to happen. "We are relieved that Paulo is finally home, but he should never have been taken from them in the first place," one lawyer said, pointing out that his valid DACA status had been completely ignored. Paulo was reunited with his family, but the scars from those 42 days are still there. A court order can't just erase the trauma of the arrest, the fear, and the uncertainty. Paulo's story is a powerful reminder of how fragile life is for the hundreds of thousands of DACA recipients who call this country home. They are our neighbors, our colleagues, and our friends, living with a constant threat that their lives could be destroyed in a single moment. If you believe their stories need to be heard, share this video. Raising awareness is the first step toward demanding a more just and humane system. So, what went wrong for Paulo Gamez Lira? He did everything that was asked of him. He followed the rules, kept his status current, and built a life for his American family. The system he trusted failed him. His arrest wasn't about public safety, It was about the power of a system that can choose to ignore its own promises. His case is a reminder that constitutional protections aren't optional, but it's also a chilling warning about the human cost of immigration enforcement. It shows the deep emotional and psychological damage inflicted on families torn apart by these actions. And while Paulo is free today, his story leaves us with a critical question: for the thousands of others living in that same uncertain space, how many more families have to be broken before the promise of the American dream feels truly safe?